And we're back.
So, Neil, where have you been?
Yeah, I'm back too.
Where are you back from?
I went on a little vacation,
Vacation? Not allowed vacations around these parts.
No, actually it was, it was a working trip. There's a clue in the t-shirt and the hat. The hat probably gives it away.
Yeah.
I went to Moscow for 2 weeks.
To meet Putin.
Yes. No. I was in the Kremlin though.
You were? Inside?
Not inside. It's a big complex. It's really a big place, but there's sort of presidential buildings. You can walk around it though. It's just heavily guarded. And it's not open all the time, the fortress. But there are churches, museums, the Kremlin Armory. Went in there. Basically a museum, like a state museum with some really rare things like the crowns of past tsars. And not like replicas and stuff. These are the original artifacts, original thrones. Very interesting place. The Kremlin is impressive. I mean, the security's off the charts too. But then everywhere in Moscow, there's high security. You go through airport type security to get in and out of everything. There's police stationed everywhere. In Western capitals, since the last 10 years, they've had military patrols, like in France and Germany. That's because of the terrorism. But here in Russia, it's a high police presence all over the place. Which, is understandable, especially since 2022. A lot of security cameras too everywhere.
Well, they're at war, I suppose. So.
They're at war, but then everywhere has it, right? The difference, though, with Russia is, I checked this, the most surveilled street, and probably, therefore, the district around it on Earth, is Oxford Street in London. In terms of sheer numbers of cameras and complexity and array of surveillance system, Oxford also has a high crime rate. Doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any of the supposed intended effects because often the criminals are of certain backgrounds that are protected status in an unspoken, informal way in the West at the moment. In Russia, it's different. So what I'm saying is they have the same high levels of surveillance, especially in the cities, but there's no crime. Now, I wasn't, obviously I'm talking about the center of the city, but I saw quite a bit of, we stayed outside of Moscow City. We were in Moscow region, so traveling back and forth into the center. So I saw a fair bit of the surrounds, I suppose suburbia, and even countryside, because we went further into the regions as well for a couple of day trips. And yeah, it's the same everywhere. It didn't matter whether you were in what was clearly a rich part, fashionable streets, high tourist zones, or whether you were in suburbia or in the countryside. I was able to count on two hands the number of homeless / obviously pissed drunk people during the day. So, vagrants. I think I counted 6. And that's between the two cities, because I spent 4 days in St. Petersburg as well. Most of those, actually 4 of those 6 were in St. Petersburg. Moscow 2. And they stand out because it's like suddenly it's shocking. And it's shocking to Russians walking around them, kind of looking at them like, what are you doing, dude? Maybe now they were tourists, I suppose, like me. Russia's not got any. Probably one of the few Western tourists. People we spoke with there were shocked that you're from the West. Wow, we don't see many of you these days.
No doubt.
But the cities are booming anyway, because with tourism this time of year, because the shortfall is easily made up by Russians. That was an interesting anecdote for how well the country as a whole is doing. Because what a critic would say back to me is, but you went to the top 2 cities.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you're seeing like Potemkin village, Russia. That's easily put on for the foreigners who do visit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Russians from Siberia, the Far East, Volgograd, Rostov-on-Don had enough disposable cash to go on their 10-day or 2-week holiday to visit the capital as well, and spend the same kinds of higher prices to visit the sites and spend on souvenirs and stuff, and pay for hotels or rented apartments or whatever they did. So those kinds of things were of a similar price range.
To the West.
To the West. Those things were basically, they're at parity. And the idea that then other basic costs of living, I suppose food in general in stores is cheaper. Sure. But not, we did some comparisons of some basic goods, maybe a third to half as expensive. So that's not a huge drop off. And remember, Russians' wages are still lower overall. But that tells you that the purchasing power parity means that they do live comfortably, and I saw that everywhere. There's no slum cities. There's no migrant camps. There's no migrants. Period. In Russia, there's a large underclass of Central Asian people from the stands, and they would be working there probably black market officially, and then black market, and they'd be going back and forth as well for family reasons, because they have the similar kind of chain migration issues in Russia as we have with North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and so on. So there is an underclass. There are Moscow's so vast; it's like a country in itself. You see endless skyline of huge tower blocks. That's true. The commie block thing is true. It really is and it's often an eyesore. Like I'm a harsh critic because I hate cities. Period. Urban areas, so I would be a harsh critic. So this is a vast metropolis with fucking 14-lane avenues lined with commie blocks. Not everywhere, but often, especially in our situation that we're staying in a place outside the center and frequently going in on the same route from the north Moscow region into the center. So I could see the same eyesores every day. But then in between, there are other. So they're still building those damn things. In the end, they don't have they got the population of 30 million. They don't have the space or whatever. They never did have the space to build large areas of,
single
four-bedroom houses. So, but the newer ones are much nicer, and they must have new rules because they're set back from the road. They're surrounded by parks. They keep forests and trees where possible. Yeah. So, it's
13 million in Moscow.
13 million in Moscow, and about 5 in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg's still a vast city.
Although if you include the metropolitan area, it's up to 20 million or something like that.
Right.
Of Moscow. But it's a pretty big city. But
St. Petersburg is much more attractive. They have the commie blocks, but they were all built outside to the south and east. So as you approach the center on a train, the skyline is markedly lower, and that they keep it that way. In fact, everywhere you looked, you could always see the golden domes of the cathedrals or other landmarks like the Admiralty. They seem to have more of a rules, I suppose, building rules. There should be no large pronounced skyrise buildings anywhere near the center of St. Petersburg. The worst high-rise things are outside the city.
Yeah. And it's such a big place is a problem, and even
it's vast. It's just vast.
But like anywhere, you know what I mean. But and it's been it's relatively unknown, I suppose, to Western populations because of the Cold War. After the Second World War, it didn't have the whole globalization process, I suppose, after the Second World War, and because of the division, the Iron Curtain. Let's say there's people in Western countries west of the Iron Curtain, let's say.
Well, they had their own process,
didn't get to
which succeeded in some respects. Remember, they went to space first. Post World War II.
No, what I'm saying, people during because of the Cold War and all that kind of stuff, people in Western countries,
the mixing, right on,
didn't get to know anything about Russia, and didn't travel to Russia for the most part.
Yes,
and then since that kind of continued on, I don't think there was much in the way of it wasn't a very desirable place to go to, I suppose. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, and then it just because it's a legacy of the Cold War, basically, that made it just not a place. It was never integrated, obviously, because of that Iron Curtain, etc. And then especially since then, in recent years, let's say, or in the past 10 years, maybe, where you might have thought there would be an uptick of Western interest in going to Russia. That was thwarted by the new Cold War, launched by the West, basically, or the continuation of the old Cold War, demonizing Putin, demonizing Russia, and of course then the all the stuff since 2014, the coup in Ukraine, and that shooting down of MH17?
Yeah,
MH17. Just the demonization of Russia / Putin, Putin / Russia. I mean, so few people go there, but and along with that, even if you do go, it's such a, like the cities, like especially like Moscow, such a big place. You're only going to get a small snapshot unless you spend a long time there, and the country is so big itself. It's probably very varied, in terms of standard of living. And
I heard from locals that
across
the west side of Moscow tends to be where the richest live.
Yeah, even within Moscow.
That's a rough division. Then it gets even more.
Well, because the point I'm making, I suppose, is that you talk about I went to Russia.
Yeah,
you didn't really. You went to Moscow, which is like just look at a map, like you know what I mean.
I know.
I mean, you can't really say you've been to Russia, and like I said, because it's so big and because there's so many different ethnicities and different landscapes and development all across it, you could maybe go to somewhere in the middle of Russia or somewhere in the east of Russia, and you may as well be in a different country. There would be no comparison except for maybe the language, and even then, maybe not.
Yeah.
We've got a question here. Cassandra in the chat says, how were the people in general? And I would like to add to that, because of course we in the West have our glorious sanctions, and our leaders are telling us that the people of Russia are suffering horribly. So how were the people, and how are they suffering horribly due to these wonderful sanctions?
No. The two cities are absolutely booming, thriving. I'm talking about the city. I'll get to the people. The locals were complaining that, oh my God, you came at a bad time because they're ripping up all these key access roads like the Tverskaya Avenue into Moscow all at once, and they only announced it like a month ago. But they kind of have to do their major works in the summer because the time is coming when they can't. Similarly in St. Pete, they were like, oh, really sorry about the road works, but like there were armies of construction workers. There were more residential buildings going up, more museums going up, more massive shopping malls, which are just, the shopping malls are like, they're probably how I imagined what I hear from what the first American malls were like in the 1950s, almost like Disneyland theme parks, with cutesy little ice cream parlors, flower-lined avenues inside glass domed, beautifully designed architectural malls that you could actually enjoy being in. Booming, economically booming. So there goes that bullshit narrative about, they don't have dishwashers because the military's had to take up. I saw plenty of dishwashers, fridges and everything. And cars, the cars are probably a tell, because you would expect in a Cold War contracted economy. You'd expect to see a lot of second-hand used cars, Lada type vehicles. Every fourth or fifth car in Moscow is Chinese. And when I say Chinese, they basically look like European cars, but the brand's different and the interiors are really something. We got in a few taxis that were Chinese vehicles, probably all electric, I think, except for one of them. Not a fan of that myself, but then I could see the Chinese dealerships here, there, Chang'an, Cherry, BND, BVD, like entire dealerships going up. So that's another sign of disposable cash available locally to buy foreign products, never mind subsidized internal Russian industrial goods.
Yeah, but the whole sanctions thing is I mean, it's obviously propaganda and nonsense, and it's kind of stuff the Western powers have been doing for a long time. They're so high in their own elitism and superiority that they think that if they say stuff, that it's going to be true. You know, it's going to come true if we just say it hard enough, repeat it hard enough. Russia's collapsing, Russia's economy is collapsing, and you know they try the different sanctions and stuff, but they forget about the fact that, I mean, you hear this term, the golden billion, all the time, and that refers to the West, you know, like Europe and America and a few other countries. And it's true, it's about a billion people, but that's the people who are talking about sanctioning Russia. A billion people. There's probably real world population number of the global population today is probably about 9 billion. So when you're talking about the golden billion, you're talking about one ninth, so roughly 10%, let's say, of the population of the globe. So, of course, if they're the only ones who are attacking Russia and sanctioning Russia and all that kind of stuff, sure, they have an integrated kind of like payment system, and that they have, you know, that there's the remnants of the Western empires and all that kind of stuff, and American influence around the world that can exert an influence, but you're still talking about only about 1/10 of the population in terms of, you know, of countries of population size who are trying to stop Russia. And Russia has that other
the whole of the world.
They have they have those other 8 billion people to do business with. 1.5 billion in China, you know, a very, you know, massively productive and industrial country, and then all the Southeast Asian countries in the global South and India and other 1.5 billion people. It's just nonsense.
An endless labor supply in the Central Asian stands, which we have to realize. You look at the map, and they probably look at the map and think, yeah, Russia's vast, but hey, let's shrink it here. It's really just European Russia. We can contain that. But the Russian world, Russiki Mir, is Russian-speaking world, so language commonality. That's all of Central Asia, plus orthodoxy, a religious commonality. That's a swathe of Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the Caucasus anyway, Georgia. So they have they're the best restaurants, at least that I was taken to, insisted on by the locals, was Georgian food. I'm sure there's other varieties, but they love their Georgian restaurants because they do, like, you know, all kinds of delicacies, which I probably shouldn't mention, but I love their meat. They do barbecue everything, they skewer everything. Great meat. But not just in the hospitality sector. That's their fresh fruit. That's their fresh fruit, tropical fruit sources all year round. They don't depend on, you can't cut them off and go, they'll never get bananas now because we've ensured the ships won't reach them. They've open trade traffic all year round, all the time, with their southern warm tropical belt.
But also, that's all can also come from Asia. You know what I mean? Southeast Asia. That's a lot, you know, down in Vietnam, Thailand, plenty of bananas and pineapples and all that kind of stuff down there, you know. So
the other question was how the people in general. My blink impression was they seemed a bit cold. You know, like that the stereotype of Russians, you know, not smiling and not being warmly predisposed was true, but that got better as it went along. That's just the way they are on the outside, because I was visiting with my wife and her mother, so part of the reason was she really wanted to go back one last time to Russia. She's not Russian per se, but she had spent her formative years there. So she had a load of friends that we were going and visiting, and the hospitality was superb. I mean, they would give you like the shirt off their back kind of stuff. They're just very hospitable, very helpful. Okay, so people in general, I couldn't gauge it, but the two people I was with could. They had one of them had last been, now she was only very young, but still she remembers that it was 1989, and people were cranky and bitching and moaning. And as she said, there was a hysteria to them that she didn't see anymore. They were lighthearted, happy go lucky. It's definitely, they have all the material comforts, most of them, that they need now. Basically, it succeeded. The transition of Russia from Soviet system to capitalist has very much succeeded. It's super capitalist. I mean,
although again, that's in the big cities. Like you'll have to do to get a proper assessment of how fast that development is proceeding and stuff. You'd have to probably. I mean, you can probably look up YouTube videos of people who've gone further into central Russia and eastern Russia and stuff, in smaller towns and villages and stuff.
I'd love to visit.
See how things are going there, you know.
Yeah, I'd love to visit a few. Novgorod is apparently awesome. It's like a much smaller version of Moscow, with this little Kremlin and 1 million people, small expat community. It's in a similar area. I think it's a bit further east.
Yeah.
And it's now connected by highway. They were proudly announcing on the TV news there that there was now a completed multi-lane highway connection going from Moscow to all the way through Nizhny Novgorod to Kazan, which like reduced the time it takes from like, it used to be 30 hours drive to like 7 or 8 or something like that. So yeah, there was I remember I'm only there 2 weeks, and we couldn't spend that much time in visiting that many sites, because we were based outside the city, and it takes quite a while to get in. We were even beyond the end of the metro line. But when I said it was booming earlier, it's booming economically, and everyone's busy. There's no, like I said, there's no homeless people. Everyone has a purpose. Everyone's doing something. That's in marked contrast, say, with earlier in the summer. My wife went to a conference, and I drove with her, and I basically had a day to hang out in a famous and very well visited tourist city, much smaller, of course, in scale, Montpellier in the south of France. Very cool, very nice. I just ran around to a few key sites, and that was the end of my day. But there were no-go streets. Well, no-go. I wasn't going to walk down them because it was thronged with a lot of, let's say, non-locals with nothing to do but drink or smoke, whatever they were doing, hang out. Like, you just, and we're so used to that. That's partly why I say I now hate cities, because I'm going by Western cities. Like, there's a lot of people hanging around or on the e-scooters, you know, or coming up to you, kind of trying to bump something off you. It just doesn't happen. No, I didn't see that.
But that's just lack of tourism. I mean, it's definitely probably got worse in depending on the European city, but that's always been the way in European cities.
There were tons of tourists. I saw a lot of Arabs, but they were all tourists. Can't say that about European cities. You see a lot of Arabs, you tend to want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Well, especially, I mean, I suppose my point is that in European cities, it's been for a long time, long before the immigration business and stuff. I didn't really, you know, in cities, you're kind of like, you know, avoiding the poachers, the tourist poachers, you know what I mean? The ones that are waiting, trying to sell you this or sell you that or sell you the other, or look a bit dodgy or whatever, you know. That's been there for a long time. So, but maybe that just says that there's been a lot of immigration for a long time, of one type or another, and it just got worse recently. But then, even geographically, you're going to get, even without European governments kind of actively encouraging immigrants into European countries, you're going to get a lot of others, let's say, because of where Europe is and how, it's quite close. Obviously, you can get from North Africa to Spain or Italy or Greece, or even just through Turkey, whatever. A lot easier, and it's a much more densely populated area than Russia is, for example. So there's going to be more. There's more.
But border policy works. Hungary doesn't have this problem because they choose to have borders. Mm-hmm. This was highlighted for me, like in the black and white sharp contrast. Getting into and out of Russia. If you were non-Russian, you joined this queue, which is everyone else, foreigners. It's an hour. And you're queuing with, in Russia's case, a lot of people have come from the Central Asian countries. Mm-hmm. There was one other Western dude with me. And he was like, I managed to change queues because one of the people I was with was Russian citizen. And she managed to talk to someone who convinced that, because it was like 1 a.m. in the morning. We couldn't wait an hour. But still, the process with border control was I needed, to show a visa, mm-hmm. have fingerprints taken, photo taken, a few questions asked, looks mm-hmm. you up and down, a few more questions. Okay, you can go through. Same on the way out. It mm-hmm. took an hour to go through the same process on the way out. And at one point we were shouted at by this big Frau of a border control woman, to everyone form an orderly queue because people were starting to, try to pass each other mm-hmm. out. And no, strict line, the whole, and the glare of the lights, even the whole thing was like very much put you on notice. And it must have been, it's designed out. It put you on notice that you should behave right here because this is a border control in and out of Russia.
Right. So in Moscow.
In Moscow, Vnukovo airport. We returned to France. We've come from Istanbul. The plane's full of people. Istanbul is proud to be the gateway to the world. Mm. So there's people there on the plane who are from the Middle East, they're from Africa, from Central Asia, probably not from Russia, all over the place. And they're making a flight into France. Passport control in France. Similar. There's about 6 guys at the desk. There's no division at all. It's all passports. There's no EU, France, and then rest of the world. It's everyone come in. And I saw everyone just let through. A quick look at the passport, next. There was no border control as a matter of choice. Mm-hmm. That's policy. And the Russians are...
Yeah.
So in a way, they are physically stricter with interaction with the West. On the other hand, of course, the Western, it is a Western imposed digital iron currency of its own choice, iron curtain of its own choice, to make it so damn hard to be able to visit Russia. Not that it was that hard in the end. It was pricier to have to go around and not be able to fly straight there. The single hardest thing to do is to try and get online there to get into their mobile phone network. Mm-hmm. You've got to get crafty, because there's almost that's been cut. Your phone won't work there, not even with roaming. Not even the Wi-Fi will work with it. You need either an eSIM that will work, or you need to find ways to get a Russian SIM, which is tricky, but it's doable. That was the single most biggest impediment. Mm-hmm. The rest of it is all in people's heads. The fear, the propaganda that's been instilled in Westerners about going to Russia, that's the rest. It's a bit like during COVID. In actuality, you remember it started up and everyone, or most people, went, oh my God, I can't even leave my house without the government. Oh my God. But those who ventured, mm-hmm. he who dares, mm-hmm. they thought, well, let me just see if I go on Ryanair.com. Oh, look, I can book a flight. Booked. Okay, step 1. What if I go to the airport and see what happens? Oh, they're letting me. Okay, I'm through. I'm on the plane. I've arrived. Oh, it's a mirage. Mm-hmm. It's the illusion that you can't do it. It's the same thing here. Essentially, you can go.
Yeah.
And they're happy to see you. And you're not singled out for. In fact, the only time anyone expressed anything really of interest was, oh, you're from the West, and they spoke English, and they were like delighted to be able to speak English with someone for the first time in 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the one I want to say one thing though, that it wasn't just digital 21st century surveillance, like cameras everywhere. And I don't just mean like around the Kremlin. Of course, there's a lot of surveillance there. It was everywhere. Every metro station you go into, airport security style sweep of your person. If you set off the alarm as you walk through the X-ray thingy, and your bags always go through a device as well for scanning it. Every metro, every time you go in, and there's multiple staff around. Some are armed, some are not. So some are metro staff, some are police. Every major landmark, that could be a cathedral or even some museums, and some of the biggest shopping malls, same thing. At first, it was driving me nuts. I was like, "Oh my god!" It just adds delays and queues and stuff.
But it's also it's not very. It doesn't. I suppose you get used to it, but even if you did get used to it, you still have to recognize the fact that this isn't that security presence and security checking all the time doesn't exactly make you feel like. If you thought about it too much, I suppose you wouldn't feel very safe in a certain sense, even though that's what it's meant to provide. It's like, well, why do they need all this? You know what I mean? Like seeing, like I know in France and stuff at times where there's been terror attacks, whatever, and they put soldiers on the streets or on the airports and that kind of stuff, like that unsettles people. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily make people feel safer. You know what I mean?
Well, it unsettled me at first.
Yeah,
but
it points to a potential threat there all the time. You know what I mean? Sure, you can normalize it after a while. If you're living there all the time, you're just going to know, and you're just going to think it's normal. But the fact that it's in place.
Well, what I started to put myself in the shoes of the Western liberal critics, because they would experience that or just see it from the outside or listen to this testimony and go, "Well, there you go. That's what we've been saying. Russia is quite far right, authoritarian. It's quite fascist, and they're not wrong in that sense." So, but what I was wondering was then, is it that security / political cultural architecture that's around them all the time that modulates their behavior, or are they like that anyway, or are they conscious of it and explicitly agreeing with it that we need to do this together because of our circumstances? You know what I mean? I was trying to weigh them up, but you can't do that in 2 weeks. But we'd be going down one of those massive escalators to like to their unbelievable. Some of the metro stations are indeed works of art, and you go down. Some of them are super deep, and they were built that way in case of nuclear war and stuff like that. And they're huge escalators, and everyone's on it, and security cameras everywhere. And I was just thinking, and there's a lot of young people. I arrived back in France and I saw a sea of grey hair. In Russia, it's the demographic pyramid's the other way around. It's mostly young people. You'd expect hijinks in a place like that, because you could step off the escalator and slide down the central aisle, which is shiny sheet metal. You could do all sorts of stuff, or run up and down, or cross over to the next one. No one ever steps out of line.
Fascism.
I know, the teenagers don't do it. They've
Where's the freedom in that, Neil?
Where's the freedom? But they do their little thing here and there, especially in Petersburg. The Petersburg kids protest by embracing goth heavy metal, blue hair, pink hair. I saw a couple of girls holding hands in Petersburg, just lightly, with a sort of smirk on their face, like, "Ooh, this is bad here."
Didn't you get propositioned?
Okay, well, that was, yeah. That was Petersburg. That was the Nevsky Prospect, which we went down like at nighttime. That was a bad idea because it's kind of a bit seedy, especially at one part of it. And I saw this flagrantly flaming gay type, and he said something. I'm like, "What?" And then he goes, massage. And I'm like, "No, fuck off." And then there was a follow-up. There was another guy, and I in this case, I don't think he was. I think he was asking, like, he had flyers as well, and I think he was like giving flyers to a brothel or a massage parlor or something like that. So I got it. That was a strange evening because I got this dose of a seedy underside to St. Petersburg anyway, all at once. Then it was the third time there was a girl definitely with flyers, and it was definitely for something else. And that was all in the space of 40 minutes in a certain section of Nevsky Prospect. Plus, what I was saying was that the younger ones there, there's a much snobbier intellectual kind of we're thespians here. Yeah. Maybe it's a student thing.
Well, St. Petersburg maybe it's a history. I'd be interested to look at it from
it's been pro-West.
Exactly.
It's built that way.
It's the most Western major city.
Moscow's definitely more patriotic.
Yeah.
More.
I think in terms of fascism, it's like there's two types of fascism. There's, you can call that fascism, and lack of freedom, whatever, government surveillance, all that kind of stuff, and controlling behavior, people regimented, all that kind of stuff. But then there's also the other type of fascism. I suppose that'd be right-wing fascism, and then left-wing fascism would be like the whole forcing transgender surgery or transgender ideology on parents and children and all that kind of stuff that you see in some Western countries. So it's like, it's a point that at this point, it's maybe where forget about idealism. It's like pick your form of fascism that you want to live under, and obviously, it depends on your ideology. But the one that would prioritize, let's say, security, and like a kind of authoritarianism or security state that seeks to keep the country as it is and is essentially therefore conservative, and would be attempting to prevent, radical types from, from acting up within the country. That's a better type of authoritarianism, or better type of fascism, if you want to call it that, than the kind of fascism where the state is actually forcing that kind of radicalism on the population on pain of being censored or being prosecuted or being fined or even put in prison for stuff you say on the internet. Like, for example, if you don't like that kind of leftist radicalism, it's the state actually punishing conservative people. Whereas in Russia, you could argue that the level of fascism, they have not fascism, but they have to maintain a level of authoritarianism in order to prevent that kind of radical ideology, leftist ideology from...
Exactly. In Petersburg, there's all the wokery you want on display. You can personally choose it. There's just no flags. There's no city flags all the way down Nevsky Prospect saying it's not state sponsored wokery.
And it should never be state sponsored.
And I think for the most part, it's just socially frowned upon. Here you separate the architecture that's beating people down, and you put it aside. It's just the way they are socially, and we've talked about that plenty before. That is the normal social mass of people in all countries. That Russia is no different then from anywhere else, with having most people like socially police each other as to what the norms are. For the vast majority of cases, the kids, young people, everyone, they dress well, they're super well mannered. The tale would be, I would agree with Tucker Carlson here, that a way to see a place, a way to see the people is to look at the place, and orderliness and cleanliness. And Russia's top notch. I saw street cleaners all the time, some with techs, some just with brooms. Street sweeping trucks cleaning all the time. Not that they needed it. Sometimes there's overflowing garbage and stuff like that, but the streets are clean. The buildings are clean. They're being renovated where possible. Crumbling facades fixed where possible. Same as anywhere else. And people dress well. Hardly saw anyone who was overweight. Again, more so in St. Petersburg. More excess seems to be allowed there. What I did see in Moscow and didn't see in Petersburg was a kind of popular expression vis-a-vis the war. So maybe now we'll play this little clip I recorded. Do you want to put that photo up? This is proof I was there. Okay, there you go. Proof. That day was nuts because it was the day I spent most time around Red Square. I think we went to the Kremlin Armory that day. That's St. Basil Cathedral, and it was pissing rain. But it was the only day it was like that. Otherwise, the weather was awesome. I avoided like the heat wave of Western Europe. The weather there was like it was like peak spring. Everything was lush. They flowers everywhere. Just gorgeous. It was 21 to 23 C during the day. Nice at night, 14, 15. It really only rained once that day. Otherwise, it was big blue sky and beautiful open. It's a very flat place. Actually, the Kremlin's kind of on a hill, but other than that, when you get out of Moscow, it's just flat. So you have big sky,
the vast majority of the
big
country's
fluffy
flat,
clouds. It's gorgeous, gorgeous scenery, gorgeous weather. So and that day was a monsoon. I mean, it was flash flooding warnings all over the place, but I got totally soaked, but I didn't care. I was on White Square, loving it. So this might take a moment to transfer to Scotty to play, because it's a heavy file. Sorry, I probably should have shrunk this first. So I had heard of there were obviously there were billboards by either Moscow Authority or by the state, advertising for recruitment drives for the war. It wasn't saturated, but there were quite a lot of it. But you'd see all that in between the usual corporate advertising for the new Russian version of Burger King, for this event at the theater. It was just placed among it. You could see it, but it didn't saturate the whole climate. The war doesn't dominate life, and that's by design. I'm pretty sure part of the reason the Ukraine war has been such a slow burn is because of a strategic decision on Russia's part to carry out the SMO at a certain maximum threshold of cost economically, but therefore cost socially, to potential blowback and disruption in the country, and displeasure among the people that so many guys are dying, and stuff like that. I did see, especially as we took train to and from Petersburg, I saw quite maybe 20 overall active duty soldiers with their military bags. Some grey-haired dudes, probably more senior officers, a lot of Marines, and then younger lads, some with Wagner patches. I doubt they're still fighting under Wagner's flag, but they were clearly showing off that they had been Wagner. And some were saying goodbye to their family as they got on the train, probably returning to duty. Others were, I saw the classic scene of someone seeing his family on leave. That was sweet. So he hadn't seen his kids in a while and stuff like that. So it's normal life there, and they're trying to keep the war's effect on normal life to a minimum. That's partly why Putin is infuriating the entire dissident world that wants this to be wrapped up and done in Ukraine, dealt with ASAP, because they're trying to keep this on a slow burn. Okay, Scotty's got it. So this is down the road from the Kremlin on that same super rainy day. I spotted this from across the way at the, they have a cool kind of sky bridge. Pause that a sec. Yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead and play it. There's nothing to...
Introduce it first.
Well, I just saw it from a distance. We're on the sky bridge over the Moscow River, and I looked back on the bank. This is the same bank, the Kremlin. This would be on the northern bank, whatever. And I spotted a couple of flags, and I went, "Oh, they look like they're for sale. So I want to buy one of those." I saw a Christ the Savior flag, which is what some of the hardcore old believer troops in the rank and file have been waving and displaying on their gear in the Donbass. And so I thought I was going over to a kind of a a street sale of some gear, you know, and I could maybe pick up a flag. And then as we approached, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is like an impromptu public vigil / memorial to the war dead in Ukraine. So yeah, we'll right there. This is a memorial or vigil more like, to the war dead in, I suppose we call it Novorossiya now. You see some names and photos here, platoon or battalion flags, plus, well, you know the others. Lovely flowers, not real, but lovely wreaths. And then there are some figures here you do know. There's Motorola, and I forget his name, the guy who was head of the DPO for a while, GB, and that other, Jesus, there's your man who was the Wagner chief, along with Prigozhin. So yeah, Russians still fondly remember him, even if we know that Putin knows that he was extremely naughty, to say the least. Christ the Savior flag, Russian Imperial flag, Berlin banner, some more wreaths here, old DPR flag. And you can light candles and donate, but it's pissing rain, so I don't think any of them are lit. I sent that to you, and I was surprised that Wagner could be, not least Prigozhin could be, that could be allowed, because you could see Kremlin just not far in the distance. But you suggested back that, well, this is tolerated.
Yeah, because
in the end, they're patriots and they're useful.
Yeah,
useful
they serve the
supporters.
purpose. You're not gonna. You would be an own goal for the government to take a strong line against that. You know what I mean? Because it's too closely associated with the Russian military, and you know.
Yeah, like I said, there were guys with Wagner patches, so they must be tolerating that too, despite the sort of attempted coup or protest or whatever that was in 23. Yeah, I don't speak Russian, so I couldn't really ask directly, but one of our party did, and the cabbies tended to be patriots. They all had their Georgian ribbon, St. George's ribbon in the cabs, and they're calm about it. You know, they probably share a similar desire for it to be over with and dealt with, and for Ukraine to be smacked harder, and Odessa and Kharkiv returned to Russia, Mother Russia. We founded those damn cities. Give them back, you bastards. They were only on loan to you. But there's no serious... there is a serious problem in Russia with right-wingers to Putin's right, who would like to enact and do these things. But on the streets, there's no political... People support Putin. They trust him. It's been too long. But we already know that their own polls, even international polls, despite the disparaging headlines, I mean, in the end, what they have to say is, latest poll shows Putin support is back up at 75% in Russia. Well, that's because they're not able to think, or some bullshit. You know, they suggest to you that, well, they're Russians, you know, they're Slavs, they're slave mentality. It's bullshit. Especially the old guard, people over 60, like they all have fucking science degrees or in the hard sciences or engineering or highly educated, because they would have inherited the best of the Soviet academic system. But even the kids today, like they wipe the floor of the Chinese when it comes to math competitions, AI competitions. The Russians are super techie. Okay, guys on the street, your cabbies, totally informed. They got the gist of geopolitics. That's the big difference, I suppose. In the West, geopolitics, the word is like you ask your average person and they just blink at you. Gee, what? All they know is they know the Hollywood fantasy version where we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. But they can assess the tempo of geopolitics and the power dynamics and spheres of influence, and they know that nothing can be rushed, and the world's a complicated place. In that sense, they're a more cultured, more educated, more calm people. They obviously they have the same hopes as everyone else, a good future, and they're probably sick and tired of being vilified as the world's freaking Klingons or something, but they don't care. They also don't care. They're so vast, and they know they have a quiet confidence about them that they know that their own intrinsic worth. Met one guy and he's talking about I could sort of show off what I knew about it, and then he could too, but in the end he just said it's all been one long struggle. It's a continuous struggle. He was talking about the continuum of the Cold War communist ideology and today. At the base of it, it's the same struggle. We refuse to submit to whatever exactly it is, the New World Order or something satanic or that. And that tends, that, by the way, that latter depiction of it in eschatological terms is fairly commonly understood in Russia.
Yeah.
Alexander Dugin or the types of ways he has of framing things in apocalyptic terms, everyday Russians are comfortable with. So that's why Putin, when we've heard him say apparently shocking things like, well, if there is a nuclear war, at least we know when we die with them, presumably he meant the Americans, we'll all be going to heaven.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a stoicism in the face of death.
Yeah, good versus evil conception of it is good versus evil, and everybody, like Americans, have that conception of it as well, and at different times it's presented to them that way by their government. So, but the question is, what's objectively true? Who's right? Who is actually on the side of good and who is actually on the side of people? And obviously, that comes down to perspective. So,
any other questions there in the chat, Scotty? Because obviously I have a lot of impressions and stuff, but I'm not long off the plane, so it's hard to.
No, doesn't look like it.
Do you want to move on?
Yeah.
I mean, I can come back to stuff if it comes to it. Obviously, while I was there, when I was leaving, I was among other anxieties. I don't like big cities. I've already said that. I haven't traveled far. I tend to be very much a homebody, stay at home, safe here. So you had the massive earthquake. Okay, it's Russian Far East, whatever. But still, that was one of the biggest earthquakes ever in the last 100 years. Then when I was there was a string of 7 volcanic eruptions. I could see that reported on the local news. And of course, I left not long after Trump had revised his 50-day deadline for Russia to do something to end the war in Ukraine or else to 15 days, which would have been smack while I was there. So I was a bit anxious about any fireworks going off. And then, of course, I left not long after Trump had revised his 50-day deadline for Russia to do something to end the war in Ukraine or else to 15 days, which would have been smack while I was there. So I was a bit anxious about any fireworks going off. And then, of course, I left not a nice bit of a cloud to be traveling out under. And then while I'm there, our host turns on the Russia 1 news, and he's like, look, Trump, Putin, Alaska. I'm like, what the fuck? You're joking. This is fake news. This must be Russian fake news. Trump and Putin are not meeting in Alaska. No, they are. They did. That was very, the Russians loved that because I thought I'd be a smarty pants and inform them that Alaska was once Russian. They all fucking knew that, of course.
Of course.
And they know their local, their state media, so not your RT types, but your Russia 1 journalists who traveled to Alaska, they were going out and interviewing the local Orthodox priest because there were Russian Orthodox churches still there to this day. And other locals in Alaska who lament the lack of interaction because they used to have cross-border interaction. It's only 80 kilometers there between the two countries. And you contrast that with the clips I've seen on Twitter from American media reports about the announcement that it would take place in Alaska. They're experts. There's one clip, I don't know if you have it, but where the guy's like, mentioning en passant that Alaska used to be Russian. And I didn't know that.
A reporter, yeah.
No, I guess CNN, this is one of the, intellectual elites in American legacy media. The world events are interesting because they teach Americans not only geography but their own history. Yeah.
Well, that guy, he's just somebody, like, obviously I hope he's representative of everybody in the Western media, but he was saying basically that he didn't know it was that close because he hadn't looked at the map. He said because the way the map is usually configured, he never realized that Russia and Alaska, America, basically were only separated by a short distance. Of course, it had nothing to do with him being a complete dumbass. It was all about the maps, right? It's the maps fault.
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's people, someone like that who actually exposes their own stupidity on social media and not realizing it. Well, they're a dumbass, right? So it's not surprising that he doesn't know that because look what he just did, So yeah. So you didn't know that that was planned because it was a few days previous that they talked about going to Russia, the Trump Alaska meeting. That it was a few days previous that they'd talked. It was set up, and obviously it wasn't just announced.
What was it? I can't remember.
Yeah,
now.
It was. Yeah, it was a few days, several days.
I thought I learned about it while I was there.
They probably did, but I mean, maybe it hadn't been announced when you were there. Yeah, you probably announced. Yeah,
I think I learned about
it,
but
not on the day,
on local,
but not
news.
On the day that it was happening. You knew about it a few days before it was happening, obviously, right?
Oh yes, of course. Then it was build up. Oh yeah, and then I saw the local news reports where they were going out and talking to Alaskans. Some of whom spoke broken Russian. The grannies in Alaska who are descendants of the first Russian settlers there, still speak a broken. And the local Russian journalists, the Russian media journalists, were amazed. They were like conversing with in Russian, and our Russian hosts who we were staying with were like just beaming with pride, that there were Russian speakers in Alaska, in America, There's absolutely no animosity towards Americans. That if Putin is a dictator and he's made everyone think like them, that's for the best because they do think like them. They're essentially liberal and they essentially like Americans and they essentially realize there's a horrific architecture that oppresses psychologically Americans. That's the root cause of the outward animosity towards them. They hold no grudges whatsoever against Westerners. I think they actually are endeared. They like Americans. Our host who we stayed with, Valery, he's 80 something years old and he fondly remembers visiting Texas and he's got, little memorabilia proudly displayed from Texas in his curio cabinet and stuff like that. He loved visiting. When it opened up in the 90s, he just loved going to the US and loves his own country more and won't submit and thinks Putin needs to hold the line, but loves Americans.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know if it's evidence of an educated population, but it's evidence of a decent population who don't fall for the kind of like the 1984 type of thing,
Hate week.
hate Oceania and stuff like,
Yeah.
Yeah. But so yeah, Trump, Alaska, I don't know. It's strange.
I'm seeing
the whole thing is nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's just stupid. It's complicated, stupid nonsense. But also, it is what it is. So it's obviously happening. So you have to accept it. You can't just dismiss it.
just 3 hours long. Hardly much of substance.
What was the point? Yeah, it was obviously, 3 hours. Well, it was obviously for optics, right? I mean, this is almost, I don't know. For me, anyway, the only thing you can draw from it, obviously not knowing what they discussed, and I don't think they discussed things very clearly. I mean, so much depends, so much requires you to assume Trump is an idiot. So much of what has been going on over this Ukraine conflict with Trump supposedly trying to make peace, the fact that it's taken so long, and the stuff Trump has said, and this most recent thing almost requires you to assume that Trump is a retard, and I don't think he is. So it's confusing to me, because Putin has been clear for at least a year more, if you want to go back further, but definitely a year repeatedly, and the Russian government have repeatedly made their conditions for an end to the conflict very, very clear. So,
and everyone in Russia, by the way, can cite them by heart.
Right. So how can Trump not know that? He can't not know that. Yeah. He has to know that that's what it is. So it's like, it's pretty clear, right? It's like, okay, you might be saying, well, we don't really accept those terms, but maybe we'll try and find some wiggle room. So then we have to have talks to try and see if they'll back down a little bit on some of the stuff, or whether they'll, we know what your conditions are, but would you accept this? Would you accept this? Would you accept this? And maybe that's what's actually going on. That's why it's taken so long, because, and the other aspect of it is the optics. The sad thing about this is the optics, although it's a reality that you have to accept, but it seems quite cynical, and it's the optics. America doesn't want to appear to have lost.
Yes.
So this isn't, as much as Trump talks about it, this isn't about Trump the peacemaker saying, look, not my war. This is Biden's war. Would never have happened if I had been in power. That's all bullshit. He kept on going on about all the javelins he sent to Ukraine. And he poured weapons in his first term in 2017, from 2016 to 2020. He poured weapons into Ukraine during that period. It is his war.
Yeah.
He didn't know what he was doing maybe at the point, because he was only getting up to speed on Geopolitics 101. Then he didn't know, and he just went along with what was already happening since 2014, the coup in Ukraine. But it is as much his war, even if he was doing a lot of it in ignorance. So he doesn't want, he and the Americans in general don't want to appear to have lost the war to Russia, because that has real world consequences, where like reputational consequences, and that translate to people maybe deciding to buy Russian military equipment over American military equipment, and just the general feel, oh, you lost that war, didn't you?
Yeah. Wow,
America lost a war against Russia. It's like Russia and America, they're the kind of peer competitors in the world today, and you just lost to them.
Yeah.
What does that say? And let that sink down, let that filter down through society, you know what I mean? Through business and society. Yeah. Let that new reality take hold and see what happens. And they're like, no, we don't want that reality to take hold. Yeah. So there's an optics aspect to it, where it has to be configured. The peace conditions have to be configured in such a way that America doesn't appear to have lost.
Yeah.
And I think Trump is aware of that, because he's a businessman. He's savvy about optics and all that kind of stuff. He's very much interested in his own appearance. He wants a Nobel Prize. So he's maybe that part of his thinking around all of this. Is and that's why he's been repeatedly saying. I mean, you can dismiss stuff that he says over and over and over again. It's just Trump's just like, he's getting old, and he just forgets that he has already said that 17,000 times already. The one about,
or the opposite 3 days ago.
Yeah. But the one he's been consistent on is, this isn't my war. This is Biden's war. And that's him preemptively trying to soften, let's say, any blowback on him that he lost the war. No, I didn't lose a war. It wasn't my war to begin with. Biden lost that war. If it ever appears that America lost this war, it wasn't Trump that lost it was Biden that lost it.
Yeah.
He just handed it to me.
That might explain the urgency. Even while campaigning, I'll end this in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I want this stat.
Yeah,
so he's like, Putin, help me out here.
He's been left kind of holding the baby. Like, he was handed off a big bag of shit, basically, by Biden, who started it, the Biden administration, not Biden himself, but the Biden administration started and then handed it over to Trump and say, here you go, here's a real mess for you to deal with. And if you don't do it properly, you're going to look like the bad guy,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and to and from, I think, around the optics of it, and the Russians are obviously aware of that as well, of the need for America not to be able to save face, or Trump to be able to save face. So there's all sorts of complicated.
They're in no hurry.
No, as well, exactly. But they don't necessarily want to. I don't think they necessarily want to.
Keep going to Odessa.
Well, they don't necessarily want to deliberately make America.
Yeah,
suck it up. I think they're good natured enough to understand that Trump doesn't want. He's probably saying that to Putin over and over again. He probably spent 3 hours saying, "Listen, Vladimir, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war." You remember that, right?
He Putin then said in his prepared statement afterwards.
He did.
He literally didn't, or did. I think he said it himself, and then we heard Trump repeat it to Sean Hannity in the.
No, that was about the Reagan election.
About the Reagan election, but in his prepared statement to the press after Putin said, turned the page and said, "Yes, it's true. I'm convinced, having met Donald Trump twice,
he said
that if he had been president, this war would not have happened."
Right.
Which is what Trump needed to hear for the optics,
right,
and for his strategy,
right,
of saving face.
Yeah.
So Trump gave him what he wants.
Yeah. So you can see how it's more complicated than just look here. Those are here's Russia's very clear requirements for an end of the conflict. Why doesn't America just go ahead and do it? Well, it's not that simple. It never is, right? There's many more aspects to it, not least of which is the optics and the appearance, and then all of the, Trump's a businessman. He doesn't want to take a financial hit on this either. He has to some extent protect his European allies who have, skin in the game as well. So you can understand how it's very complicated. But this meeting in Alaska, I don't think there were any substantive changes made from what was understood beforehand. I don't think they hit on any eureka moment, finally we can agree, or something like that. It was more about creating a fact on the ground of Trump, and it was Trump doing this for Russia, basically bringing them back into the fold in a certain sense, and you can see that was the effect, because that's what the West,
rehabilitating Putin as statesman.
Yes, and that forces other people's hands, and that's what the Western media were apoplectic about over the past few days. And
the handshake, you can't give Putin a handshake.
Horrible. Yes, this was all just rehabilitating Putin, and Putin wins, and Trump lost, and Trump's an idiot. They were just throwing a hissy fit about the whole thing. And that is the clearest evidence you're going to get that that's what it was about, basically. That's how they interpret it. If they interpret it that way, if they all interpret it that way, in that negative way, then it's pretty sure that that was essentially what was intended. The major reason for having that very quick
lovey-dovey
summit.
And calling it very suddenly.
Right. Get it done, make it fait accompli, new reality, facts on the ground, and that has an effect. Then there's optics around that, right?
Yeah.
Where Putin is now seen as someone that you can actually talk to, shake hands with, applaud as he's walking down the red carpet.
Right in the beast.
Get him into the back of the beast. Go for some.
Did you see that John Brennan went on CNN after and said
Jesus.
They need to sweep that vehicle for bugs?
What an idiot!
The Russian. Let's say expert commentariat, they didn't expect much from it in concrete terms, of course, and so on. So in terms of optics, one of them wrote something very interesting in Russia in Global Affairs, which is like their foreign affairs magazine. He knows, of course, that history never repeats, but it rhymes. That when he found it analogous, we'll see, perhaps, to when Reagan and Gorbachev first met. At that time, similarly, that was in 1986. The media was like, waste of time. What can they possibly? But it led to another big milestone the next year, which has been called the Reykjavik moment, which means they met in Iceland. At that point, the first radical, far-reaching, and later substantive changes were first floated. So there was a series of summits that, when they began, it was like absolute. This, what's the point? This is just, we can't cave in. Reagan's looking soft on communism, all this sort of stuff in the media. It's a different world though, because that was then, as these commentators in the Russian press are saying, then the pressure was the source of the pressure was the opposite. In a way, it was the opposite. It came from within Russia. Dissatisfaction, crumbling economy, a war that was not going their way in Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of disabled vets on the streets, homeless, coming back from Afghanistan. Here, today, 40 years later, the pressure is coming from inside the West.
Yes, the opposite, yeah.
Inside Russia, I've just been there.
War that's not
it's
going
like,
well.
if you want, you can just live a great, easy life and just, it doesn't affect you. But everything that's going wrong, that can go wrong, is going wrong in the West. Extreme political infighting, extreme disagreement about the direction things should be going in. You've got your conservative mass up against a wall of ideological nomenclature in all the Western capitals, trying to shove things down their throats. Just like, it's the source of the heat and the friction is now on the other side.
So the point of it was to, rehabilitate Putin, the pariah, let's say, in the eyes of the Western world, and make it a fact on the ground that, they had this nice meeting. Trump was friendly, shook hands. Basically, it's a good analogy, actually, Reagan and Gorbachev. And that has an effect, that kind of, in a certain sense, makes it real for like the Europeans and Zelensky and the Ukrainians and stuff, who would be very much against this ever happening, because they're, as long as Putin is still in the camp, in the category of pariah, don't talk to him, he's an evil thug, murderer, genocidal maniac type thing, then you can get away with a lot more, But if you remove that image or try to water that down or break down that image of him and rehabilitate it into someone that's more like what he actually is, then it's no longer as easy for those people to speak in those terms, and therefore no longer for them as easy for them to push through policies that would fit the policies that you would apply to a mass murderer, right? A thug. If he's not a thug, then maybe we shouldn't have so many sanctions on him, because the only reason we're sanctioning him is because he's a thug, right? If he's not a thug, does that mean less sanctions? That mean, that you can talk to him, that he's reasonable, and in fact the things that he's asking for aren't thuggish, they're actually more reasonable, his demands. And so that image, it's sad that that's the way it works, but that's the way it works in the world, optics and that's how it works on people. Psychologically, works on people that way, When people are deluded, you have to break the illusion, And
then you get the reaction. So Europe's panicking, and now they're rushing to DC. Von der Leyen is going to hold Zelensky's hand this week, meeting Trump. The latest, apparently, Trump has Truth Social. He wants a summit again this Friday with Putin and Zelensky. That's a bit soon. I don't know how the hell that can happen, but you get a sense of the urgency again. He wants to act before probably the Euros and the globalist conglomerates behind them can wedge in and divert or co-opt what he's initiated with Putin. He wants to go to the next step.
Keep it rolling. They're going tomorrow. That idiot von der Leyen, who doesn't speak for anybody, from the EU, and Stormer and Merz of Germany. I don't know if Macron's going or not. Maloney, a bunch of them are all going with Zelensky tomorrow to the White House to get debriefed or briefed or whatever on what happened over the weekend there. So. And also to try and, I suppose, set up something maybe for, I don't know, Friday, next Friday coming.
With Putin there?
Yeah, as well. Yeah, it would be Putin, Zelensky, and that's the idea, right? Putin, Zelensky, and Trump as mediator to stop them punching each other, or stop Zelensky getting too emotional. But that would be a good one. Like Zelensky, I can't imagine Zelensky being able to hold his shit together if he was in the room with Putin. Like, you know what I mean? He's such an idiot. Like, you know, he would think it'd be better for his legacy to actually try and attack Putin and punch him, you know. And let it all fall apart than actually go along with this charade of giving away my land type thing, you know.
He's already said no way to any kind of land. He's trying to say no.
But I've been saying that all along. Like. But it's like he wants that, so you keep saying it, and that's the thing. If you think he's fully in the camp of the reality creator. He's been brought into the reality creator camp because he's aligned with him, and they seem to think that if you keep saying something, that eventually it'll become true. But Trump said something interesting at that conference. Did you see when at the very end of their press conference, which was only 12 minutes after they had their meeting, Putin said, this is it here, Putin said, invited him to, well, Trump said, we'll do it again or something next time. And Putin said, maybe in Moscow.
Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
So here's the thing. I mean, Trump's immediate response, obviously, people know that he would get heat on it, but here's the thing.
That's all Putin has to say.
Who, and all this talk of peace, and the Europeans united, Trump on it as well, everybody in the world basically at this point, of any note having said, with any platform having said, there has to be peace in Ukraine. The war has to end. No more so the Europeans in recent months, in last 6-7 months, saying it every 10 minutes. So this is the first meeting between these two, with the title of the conference Pursuing Peace. Mm-hmm. So a follow-up as soon as possible in Moscow, reciprocal, one in America and another one in Moscow, normal, natural. But Trump's immediate response is, I'll get a little heat for that.
I know.
So who doesn't want peace then? Because that's clearly another meeting between the two of them in Russia would be the next, would be pushing the peace process further.
Yeah.
And bringing an end to the conflict, which everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
But who's giving the heat to Trump to stop that happening? Who doesn't want peace?
The CIA.
I don't know who he's talking about, but he's going to get heat from somebody apparently for even having another meeting.
Well, he's talking about the climate of the last 10 years of Russiagate and Russophobia. Mm-hmm. To go to Moscow, that would be it. That would in the narrative of all that bullshit. It would be there. You see, he's controlled by Putin.
I don't think that'll be worse. I think it's the worst that's already happened. Putin coming to America. That's worse than Trump going to Moscow.
Yeah.
Or Trump going
to
Russia.
But Alaska was a masterstroke. Because it's America, yes, but it's just next to Russia.
It's still America. The American Air Force, the American soldiers laying out the red carpet for Putin. I mean, geez, you know, that's disgraceful. How humiliating.
And the flyover.
Yeah.
That was really well timed. I have to give it. The Americans are shit at military parades, but that was executed perfectly. No, they just reached the end of the carpet. Oh, look up there, Vlad.
Their flyovers are it was well timed. The flyovers they're good flyovers. They do them a lot. They don't do military parades on the ground, but flyovers they do a lot.
Right.
Americans do. But I thought it was interesting as well, the pictures of the way they had set it up. Like the flyover is normal because that's, you know, it can be a sign of kind of respect. It happens quite a lot at meetings, depending on where it is and all that kind of stuff, and depending on who the heads of state meeting are. But flyovers are a sign of, you know, it's a celebratory thing. They do it on the 4th of July and all that kind of stuff. It's not an aggressive thing.
Yeah.
But this, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I thought this was a bit weird in a certain sense. It is a military base, okay, but like having where Putin would come up that from the left there on that little red carpet and then up the middle, and then the two of them were going to stand and did stand on that little stage. but flanked by 4 F-22 jets, you know what I mean? Like forcing Putin, and along with Trump, to walk between 4 of our... I've never seen that before. Like when you meet a head of state, like think of all the times where Trump has met at airports or other heads of state, and different countries have been met at airports by heads of state. Have you ever seen like 4 tanks flanking them, or 4, like, I mean, it's analogous to 4 warplanes, right? 4 tanks wouldn't be that much different.
It's
a bit unusual.
It's supposed to be a ceremonial military guard, usually in something of the traditional dress of the country.
They had one of those.
They had
somewhere,
one American
but
style
why
beforehand?
Yeah, exactly.
The first part of the carpet. Yeah.
So they had it. So why you don't need the 4 planes? Like, what's the 4 planes for? Like, and they're all pointing at you, type thing. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I've just never seen it before. I think it's
you said it there in your follow-up comment. It's not so much that I think that Trump is super insecure. Americans generally want, like, he does speak for Americans when he wants to show power to the Russians. We have power. Like, the Russians don't know you have power. And they don't. The Russians don't have to show that off to show that they have. They show it by their actions in the world. You know, yeah, definitely over the top.
You see that? Sorry. Well, you can't really see it there. There's a comment on that says, by someone called Peace and Love, Trump also put American soldiers on their knees rolling out the red carpet for the war criminal. Shame.
Yeah.
And that person's Twitter profile is ASU BS, I think that's something university, Austin, maybe university. BS degree in education, Masters of Education, Psychology and Counseling, University of Texas, Master of Science, Art Education, Art Therapy. And that person, very well educated, thinks that it was a shame, it was humiliation for American soldiers. You know, so that's the bell curve thing that people make fun of, the complete retards on the left,
yes,
and the well-educated people on the right, all sharing the same retarded opinion, and only the people kind of with a reasonable education in the middle who who actually think a little bit rather than have had their brains fried. Yeah.
Do you wonder about the source of the? We touched on it in broad social terms, that the pressure from the West in general, the pressure comes from within the West in general because of divided politics between an elite who don't give a damn about the great mass of the people they lord it over. But maybe more specifically, what the urgency for ending it now is. I mean, could it be simply that Russia's winning on the battlefield and Ukraine as a viable country in its current form is really at risk of crumbling?
It's definitely part of it.
Do they have their AI-based predictive software that's going, fuck me, it's about 3 months to 4 months away, it's coming, we need to get on this right now, to save face?
So. I think it's reasonable. Like, I mean, you put yourself in a position where it was almost, more or less, it was 3 years. Imagine you take over an army or a country or whatever, an army, you become president or even the head of an army that you weren't involved with before, and suddenly you're the head of an army that has been fighting under the command of someone else previous to you, and you've suddenly taken over for 3 years before you arrive. And for 3 years they've been, consistently being beaten to the point that they're going to lose. There's no way they can win now. What do? Well, you want to end it. You want to go, look, I'm going to cut my losses here.
Yeah.
Somebody handed me this fucking this tar baby, or this shitty situation that I can't do anything about, and the only option for me is to actually end it, to cut my losses, to quit while we're not ahead. To stem the losses, basically. So I think that is a reasonable enough explanation as to why he's doing it, because he's realistic enough to know, like, look, I inherited this. And he did, to a large extent. The reason he says is not, he did fund it and all that kind of stuff, but for most of the war, for all of the war up until January this year when he became president. So for the first 3 years, let's say, of the war, and it's only 3.5 years long, he was not involved. He was not making any decisions. He didn't have any decisions to make. He didn't direct the course of it in any way. And it all went downhill, basically. And of course, Biden, and they just walk away and give it to Trump and say it's your problem now. So yeah, imagine any rational person would just go, look, not my war, not my monkeys, not my circus. I'm out of here. Let's shut this big top down.
Yeah.
But I have to do it in a way that, doesn't exactly doesn't screw us over any more than we already are screwed over type thing,
Yeah.
But I keep going back to, I'm worried about the Middle East and the Israelis and stuff. Obviously, we haven't talked about that, but there's not much to talk about apart from ongoing genocide and the madness of Netanyahu. But I'm worried about them and the Middle East and the near future because I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but it obviously, for me, it was in no way a coincidence that October 7th happened. When it did. I.e. a year, let's say, before Trump won the election.
Yeah.
They need to have time to get the ball rolling in a similar way to Ukraine. Similar way to Ukraine, to get the ball rolling, so that when Trump comes in, there's nothing he can do about it. It's already well developed.
Yeah.
And the Israelis haven't finished. They definitely want another go at Iran and do it a bit more categorically this time. And they need the Americans, obviously, as they always do, need the Americans to be involved. And I don't think winding up Ukraine necessarily is the Israelis have any influence over that, but it certainly could be used opportunistically, or could be seen as a good time. That when things are, and they are kind of winding up, I think even now as we speak, winding up in Ukraine, like this whole thing in Alaska, and it's going somewhere fairly quickly, but maybe before the end of this year, where American military force and personnel and their general energies, let's say, of the American military will be freed up to be refocused on the Middle East, and the Israelis might take that opportunity to do that, especially they're on a clock as well. They don't know who's coming in after Trump and stuff, and they're also on a clock in the sense of they've started down a track where they're just they're being rightfully accused of committing a genocide. They've gone way past the point of no return at this point, really, from their perspective, from Netanyahu's perspective. There's no way they can turn around and walk it back. For them, the only way out is through at this point, and through means annexing the West Bank, getting rid of all the Palestinians one way or another out of Gaza, and attacking and dealing with Iran, finishing the job that they haven't. They didn't finish it. They started, but they didn't finish in terms of the axis of resistance, right? Iran is still there. Iran, if they just leave it all now, if they just leave Iran as it is, they give it another 5 or 10 years and the whole thing could be restarted again. You'd have Hezbollah back to power in Lebanon. You'd have the militias, Iranian militias back in Iran. Who knows what we've gone on in Gaza and Palestine if they don't finish all that. So it's all of a piece for them. So they have to remake the Middle East, and that includes definitively doing something with Iran.
Yeah.
And they need America involved in that.
I doubt Trump thinks about it this way.
No.
But another pressure on Israel would be if Ukraine war is wrapped up too soon, suddenly Russia is also free to look south again. Because is it coincidental that Assad eventually did fall after Russia got tied up in Ukraine?
No, well, there's a whole series of coincidences.
So Israel's looking at the two fires and going, which one's about to be put out first?
Yeah.
Well, the one of them is fire. The other one is how long has Trump got left? And they're looking at the two and they're going trying to modulate both, because Trump may come and go, but Putin's still there. And if Ukraine is wrapped up before Trump leaves, then Putin looks south at us.
Yeah, but it wouldn't all happen at once. Like the Americans can be freed up in Europe, freed up in Ukraine, while Russia is still not necessarily bogged down there, but still has to be focused there for for quite a while afterwards because of Europeans. That's the whole idea of handing it off to the Europeans. The Europeans could be thinking about moving in or trying to move in. The Russians would still have to maintain a military presence, active military presence, for quite a while, a long while, from even after the end of the conflict, official end of the conflict, in order to make sure that everything really does calm down and those, Ukrainians don't act up again, the Europeans don't get together with them, all that kind of stuff, but the Americans could walk away to a large extent, at least you could take a break, let's say 6-month break or something, and focus on Iran or something like that, so yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about that.
Yeah. It's I didn't hear much about Israel and Gaza when I was in Russia. It certainly wasn't on their daily news programs. Not a mention of Israel. I did hear from someone there that people don't get exposed to it much. But they do in the West, for all the bullshit BBC headlines that spin, everything into Hamas. At least they cover it and they show and there is a groundswell of public backlash against Israel.
It's ownership. At least to European people's credit, there's a general awareness, and it obviously is inherited. It goes back, a few generations back into the creation of Israel and all that kind of stuff. It's a European project, and by extension, a European/American project. Israel, there's responsibility there. Where that isn't that it isn't that way with Russia. Russia didn't carve up the Middle East and define the border of the Middle East after the First World War, and they didn't create the state of Israel, and they haven't been Israel's sponsor for the past 80 years. You know what I mean? So you can understand how that's bad, but there's not a sense. The reason there's so much focus on it in Europe is, I think, because people are aware that this is
our doing.
Yeah.
And
we're not happy with the way it's been done and the way it's playing out, and what governments, Western European governments and the American government is doing right now. So, and in terms of who knows the actual outcome of this, what's going to happen, it's very hard to see. It's painful. It's a painful fucking pulling teeth type thing, with it's like Zelensky and the Europeans saying no, never, no land whatsoever. They're not getting any land. It's what are you talking about? Why do you even say that? Okay, maybe you have to say that, but it's obvious that Russia is going to keep that land, and it's pretty obvious that it's not going to continue on indefinitely. Even if you get Trump to keep supplying weapons for another 6 months or whatever, it's eventually you're not going to defeat the Russians. They're not leaving those 4 provinces. They're definitely keeping Donbass. They're definitely keeping Donetsk and Luhansk. The other 2 regions, maybe that's what's been talked about. Basically, Donetsk, Luhansk, the little bits of Donetsk that they don't control, the Ukrainians the deal would be they leave, and in return, which the Ukrainians obviously Zelensky doesn't like and the Europeans don't like, in return Russia would say, okay, well, we won't take all of the other 2 of Zaporizhia and Kherson. We'll just freeze it along the line. We'll keep what we have now. So we'll redraw the boundaries of those provinces. And that's what's going to happen. So why say no, it's not going to happen? You're not going to force Russia to do anything differently. It's not going to change. Russia is going to get a chunk of Ukraine, 20% of Ukraine, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you keep saying no, it's not going to happen, we will never do that, is it's stupid, and it's not even in your control. It ultimately comes down to the Americans, and in theory, assuming Trump has the power to do it, because we know he doesn't necessarily have the power over the arms shipments and all that kind of stuff, because we saw in his previous administration when he decided to pull troops out of Syria, no troops were pulled out of Syria, right?
Yeah.
There's a separate kind of command structure there that apparently says, fuck you, Mr. President, we're not doing it. But assuming Trump can actually do that or get them to go along with it, i.e. stopping the flow of weapons to Ukraine, but then it's all over. Zelensky can say whatever he wants, but it's
But do you think that separate command structure is still committed to continuing because as long as they are, then it's going to continue. Trump's optics aren't enough for them to go, oh, well, I guess we have to go along here with the president. I mean, they went against him in his face for the entirety of the first term. If they do go along with it and actually stop the weapons flying via those warehouses in Serbia and Azerbaijan and Turkey and all the ways and means they have of continuing proxy wars, then they've filtered down orders right through their global parallel network structure to enact it. So that means they're agreeing to it. But what are they agreeing to it for? What do they have in mind that goes beyond this? That's where it's scary. It's like, because last time they actually agreed to physically draw down and leave Afghanistan, a year later, we understood why. Because it was to ramp up the proxy war in Ukraine.
Right. Well, that's what I'm thinking. That's why I said earlier on about Israel, that they may see that there's bigger fish to fry in the Middle East, and this is all in the context of global geopolitics, right? In America maintaining hegemony over as much of the world as possible. At least that's the neoliberal behind the scenes perspective. Like, that's what they're fighting for. That's what they're fighting against Russia for. But the Middle East is a big element within that, and getting rid of this axis of evil, quote unquote, and remaking the Middle East completely by subduing in one way or another Iran completely, so that there's no more possibility of any axis of resistance to Israel and to American control and dominance over the Middle East is very important from that global geopolitical perspective of America maintaining its hegemony through the 21st century, and also pushing back Russia as well. It's another axis of the war against Russia in a certain sense, at least to maintain American hegemony in the Middle East. So it's not like they would be giving up the fight, if you know what I mean. They're just basically refocusing or focusing on a different theater that's maybe more important at this point. It's hard to know when you have these competing. It's hard to know because you don't know how much credit to give Trump, how much power you assign to him, how much influence you assign to him, compared to those people behind him. He didn't have an awful lot of influence in his first term. Obviously, they basically wiped the floor with him, and he got very little done. He was able to do a few bits and pieces here and there, but he was basically bogged down in court cases and impeachment impeachment proceedings for 4 years. So obviously that deep state had the ability to do that. Maybe they're less so inclined to do that and less able to do that now because he has a bit more of awareness, but he's obviously still to some extent kind of hamstrung, and he's just trying his best, and we don't know to what extent he actually is on board with that deep state agenda, because he clearly is. He does want to, keep America as the greatest dominant power in the world. He just has a different view of how to go about it. He doesn't like warring your way to that. He wants to business deal your way to that.
Trump has been useful for the rest of the world because he's the first American to actually articulate what that deep state is scared of. He's shouting about BRICS, and you better not gang up against us or we'll sanction all of you. And while I was in Russia, I noticed that they covered a lot the spat with India over secondary sanctions. And Modi saying, the hell with you, back to the US, we'll do what we want, we're sovereign too, so it began with Truth Socials, but now it's actually I've seen it on American nighttime news as well, the BRICS and the danger of ganging up against us and our petrodollar. Trump at the very least has enabled freed Americans to finally say, or to get closer to being more honest with how the world is and why we want it this way, and you better not or will.
History will show that Trump was basically just his primary role at a meta level, a broad scale level, was to reveal a lot of what actually was going on in inside America in terms of the power structures behind the actual government and how they run the world and what they're trying to do. They didn't completely reveal it, obviously, but he gave a good insight into it just by not being their man. So, have you got anything else to say?
Probably not this week, though.
Not this week. Okay.
No.
Your proposition in St. Petersburg, in Moscow. No, in St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg. Do you know what the oldest profession is?
Prostitution.
No. DJ.
DJ.
They've been around since records began.
That's a good one.
All right.
Good job.
So, we'll leave it there for this week, folks. We hope you enjoyed our little travelogue and our discussion on the nonsense that's going on this past week or so. We'll be back. Thanks for commenting. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll be back next week with another show. Whatever nonsense has been going on between now and then. So, till then, have a good one. See ya.
See y'all.
Can't stop the signal now.